Hi, everyone, and welcome to Modernizing PCI DSS 4 from compliance burden to competitive advantage. My name's Christopher Luft, and I am one of the co founders at LimaCharlie, and I'll be your host for today's discussion. We're really excited to dig into this topic because PCI DSS 4 isn't just a version update, it represents a mindset shift in how we think about compliance, assurance, and continuous security. For years, PCI has been treated like a checklist, something you do once a year to get through the audit before challenges that model. It moves towards continuous validation and customized approaches that fit how modern infrastructure and service providers actually operate. Today, we're going to explore how organizations can turn compliance into an advantage, not just something to survive, but something to leverage. Joining me today are some fantastic guests. Dr. Branden R. Williams, a longtime PCI Council contributor, author, and industry thought leader, who's going to walk us through the why behind PCI DSS 4, what's really changing, and how to interpret the intent behind the requirements. And from ControlCase, we have a team that's been helping organizations operationalize compliance for years, Joshua Hoffman and Ashish Kirtakar. They'll show us how MSSPs can actually productize PCI into ongoing services, what we call compliance as a service. Then finally, my colleague Chris Potello from LimaCharlie will give us a live look at how this all comes together technically, how a modern API-first platform can make continuous assurance not only possible, but reproducible. Think of today's session as a journey from philosophy to practice. First, why PCI 4 exists and what it means for you, the big changes, then how to turn that shift into a service opportunity. And finally, how to make it operationally real inside of your environment. So with that framing in mind, let's start with the big picture, why PCI 4 matters now and what it's trying to achieve beyond just another compliance cycle. Dr. Branden Williams, the floor is yours, sir.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So with PCI 4.0, we saw a pretty dramatic overhaul to the standard. I've been writing a book on PCI since 2009. So I've seen it go through multiple different iterations, but this is the iteration that I think we wanted maybe 10 years ago. It's the one that really needed to happen. When you look at the sheer volume of information, you're going from 139 pages to 360 pages. So it's, you're almost in the triple range of like the amount of content pages and things that are going to be included in the new version of the standard. And they did a pretty big overhaul of like how things look and where things are located inside the standard. So I'll kind of give you an idea as we go through like what some of those things are. Just to get you prepped. Now, just to be clear, everyone should be doing a PCI 4.0 assessment for your next iteration. This is now the current version of the standard as of March. It's current version from earlier, but anything that was best practices is now full on, like you need to do this as of March. So that's something where we have seen some remediation activities that kind of dwindled a little bit, have had to get crammed through right before your assessment, but you should be looking at assessing against 4.0.1 unless you have some sort of rare exception from your acquirer. So one of the first things when James and I were writing the book, we basically had about 5 months from the release of the standard to cram everything in there. And we got one of the early beta versions of the standard and started working with it. It was actually the second one. But in the first one that we got, one of the things that was really interesting is the council really showed their hand on what they're trying to do or what they think the future of PCI should be. In the first iteration of like for public comment for PCI 4.0, there were no compensated controls, and instead there was this thing called the customized approach. I think a lot of people who were reviewing the standard probably through their, were up in arms a little bit, saying, "Hey, you can't take away our compensated controls. We need these things." But it's something important to consider. So in the customized approach, what the council's doing is they're basically saying, like, "Hey, if you can't meet a particular requirement, we're going to tell you what the objective, what the control objective is for that requirement. You can find an audit firm or a secondary firm to write a control for you, and then the QSA can assess you against that control. So it has to be two different firms. So now we're starting to shift in kind of looking like more of an audit than an assessment. And PCI was really never an audit. It was always an assessment. Back in the day, we had in my team, people doing both remediation and doing assessments, both working for my company, when we would put walls up in between them. But for a customized approach control, you can't do that. Now, one of the things that I would, if you're thinking like, wow, I do have some compensated controls, that may affect me, the first thing I would do is look at what compensated controls you have and then start thinking about what do I want to do with those? Do I want to just fix the underlying issue, or do I want to go to a more complete sort of like customized approach option where I still can't meet the control as designed, but I want to put something else in place? Those are going to be expensive. Just based on the people that I'm talking to that are trying to do this right now, they're a lot more expensive than a compensating control. So if I were in your shoes, I would try to fix the underlying issue. And if you're wondering, like, where do I find more information if I have this particular requirement? How do I understand what that control objective is? If you look in the current versions of standard, you will see on the left, they've kind of broken it up into 3 columns, right? We've got our approach requirements, we've got the testing procedures, and then there's guidance. So it's all in one document. And then under the actual requirement, if the requirement is eligible to be used for a customized approach alternative, you will see something that says customized approach objective. So I just haven't had PCI up right now, and I'm looking at requirement 641, which talks about public-facing web applications and the things you need to do. There's several ways that you can meet this requirement based on the requirement and the testing procedure. It gives you several options. But if you look at the customized approach objective, what it says is public-facing web applications are protected against malicious attacks. So super broad. If you were to write a control around this, I would try to highlight as much of the things that are happening in the actual requirement and then go forward with that and have it assessed. But ultimately, if, again, like I said before, if I was in your shoes, I would be moving away from compensated controls and avoiding customized approach objectives and focusing on meeting the standard itself. It's probably going to be cheaper in the long run. The next big thing that they did is they put a lot of extra guidance in there. It's not only in the form of the customized approach objective, but it's the stuff that's on the far right column that sort of gives you ideas of what the intents are and some examples of scenarios. The one thing I will caution you is that you can't assess against the definitions or the guidance. Sorry, you can't assess against the guidance. So as you're going through, if you notice, some of these requirements will actually have guidance that conflicts with the testing procedure or the requirement. I just came across one of these the other day, and I wish I could remember which one it was. I was thinking about it before I joined. I couldn't rack my brain to figure out what it was, but it was something where when you read the requirement, it was pretty clear, and then the guidance included stuff that wasn't in the original requirement, sort of like options or exceptions or things like that. So that wasn't a super great scenario to be in. You definitely need to be focused on the requirement and the testing procedure when you're going through your assessments. But I mean, obviously, when you're going from 139 pages to 360 pages, you're definitely going to get some new stuff that gets in there. The next thing to consider is that there's some new countermeasures that are in play. And when I say new countermeasures, it's like they're not new to us; they're just new to PCI. There's 2 in particular that they've really sort of advanced forward that they want companies to handle. The first one is they finally acknowledge that phishing is actually a threat, and we probably should have some training against it. So you should be training your employees that have access to payment card data regularly with phishing simulations and be able to have those records for your QSA. The second item on that is if you're a service provider, you need to be able to detect and alert or prevent covert communications. So C2 stuff that's sitting underneath, you need to be able to see it and then do something about it. If you're running a modern firewall, you're probably already getting these alerts. I know that, for example, Palo does this, where you'll get alerts from Palo saying, like, hey, I'm detecting C2 traffic or something that looks like C2 traffic. There are false positives. It's not always accurate, but you need to have that capability and be able to show your assessor that you have that capability as a service provider. The next one that's kind of interesting is around skimmers and web content. So JavaScript skimmers are responsible for quite a few significant breaches dating back even to 2014. For those that are kind of trying to think of like what would be the equivalent in the news I might have seen, it would be MageCard. MageCard is the example of that JavaScript skimmer that's pulling cards on the client side and shipping them somewhere. So we've seen those types of wide-scale attacks on specific types of software that are installed. And we've also seen custom ones, people that have like basically included JavaScript skimming shims into preloaded stuff that goes on a page and that scrapes data off there and ships it off. So as of this, this version of the standard, you need to be able to detect for that type of stuff. There's a bunch of ways you can do it. There are tools out there that will also help you with like your third-party JavaScript libraries and connections because you have an inventory. I'll talk more about inventories here in a few minutes. But then you also will have the ability to check and see if these things have changed. So if somebody has replaced something. So there's a couple ways you can do that. And use a tool. Remember that every time you deploy code, you should be getting alerts. So that'll be your way to test to make sure it's working, and you can reset and say, hey, these are okay. It's going to be a little noisy as you get through the process. But that's the other way you can do it is by hand. I actually wrote something like this years ago when I was at VeriSign to sort of pull content off of websites and then detect if it's changed. So that's basically what you're doing. Like, unless you're using some sort of obfuscation technology to basically hide what the JavaScript is doing and make it dynamic and changing every single time it's presented, you shouldn't have a problem being able to look at that and seeing like, yes, this is the same JavaScript or this is the same component that was loaded before. It's all just pulling from source. So it just depends on like how you want to do it. You could probably write something pretty simple in Go that would do something like that for you, or Python as well. I can't remember the technology I used. It was 2005, so it's probably not Go or
Python.
Yeah, it was something. Who knows, right? So the next one is on authenticated vulnerability scanning. This is something, again, that we've probably been doing as security professionals because we want to get accurate results. But this is now a requirement for PCI. So if the server is in scope, you need to make sure it's running an authenticated scan so you're getting better details of what's actually on the machine. And an example why this is really important, a couple jobs ago, we were looking at some servers that had outdated Java 5 framework installed on them. So the runtime environment was present. And this had been deprecated, I don't know, early 2000s, mid 2000s. It was really old stuff. But there was no applications actually using it. So the internal tech teams were like, well, nothing's using it, so it's probably fine, right? It's like, well, A, no, it's not fine. But if you're not using an authenticated scan, you're probably not going to detect that Java 5 running runtime environment because there won't be an application that's sitting there that can interact with the scanner. So just by having that present, if an attacker were to place a foothold on a machine, they could find some ways to break into privileged Java runtime stuff and get further into the machine if they wanted. So just removing that stuff, outdated frameworks for development, all that stuff is really important. But you won't see it unless you have an authenticated scan. Hey, you heard me a second ago talk about inventory. They've really gone pretty deep into inventories. It's not just, oh, I need to have all of my assets that are in the CDE. No, they want to know like your encryption algorithms and TLS versions and software supply chain stuff. It's a lot more from an inventory perspective. So if you have not been through this yet, what I would do is download the standard, go search for the word inventory, and then pull all those requirements out. There's a handful of them that you'll have to do something. So you're probably not doing it for certain things. Like you probably aren't considering like what are all the TLS versions and all of the encryption algorithms that are available in all of my TLS connections. You may not be doing that. There are scanners that can help you with that. You can find ways to categorize that, but you definitely need to have that in an inventory somewhere presented to your QSA. The next one is on scope reviews. It's really more formalized now. So if you're a merchant, you have to do an annual scope review. And it's just the process of like having the meeting, validating the scope is correct, saying, yes, this is correct, and then presenting that to your QSA. QSAs don't set the scope, they validate the scope. So you're going to take that artifact and hand it to them, they'll validate it. If you're a service provider, however, you have to do that twice a year. So just make sure you are setting your calendar, you're getting through that routine of doing the compliance and security work, and you're most importantly collecting the artifacts so that you can send them to your QSA when it's time. And then the last one that's really big is this thing called in place with remediation. So in the old days, when you had, for example, quarterly scans, like maybe you missed one of your scans, you would say you'd mark it in place, QSA would mark it in place, but they would say in the comments, here's what happens. Like, well, there was an issue where a patch didn't get deployed, so they waited 2 days past the window to rescan. Once they got the scans, everything was clean, but technically we don't have a Q3 scan. Now what they're wanting you to do is write it as in place with remediation. So it's more correctly calling out the fact that it's kind of like a laser beam for an acquirer who's getting a rock to say, oh, I need to look at that one. I need to see what they did differently and make sure that I'm watching this year over year. Most acquirers aren't looking that detailed, just to be clear, but that's one thing when I saw that up there, I was a little worried as a merchant or service provider that now that's going to basically shine a light on something that I may have been a mistake, or I may not want that to be as highlighted as it was. So from there, my recommendation is to definitely go through and have an assessment, look at all the BAU stuff. There's the BAU front matter that talks about business as usual activities you should be considering. But if you've already been doing PCI for a while, probably have some of that stuff already there. The difference is that because this is getting pretty onerous, you really want to start focusing on continuous compliance, continuous results, looking at what is happening all the time in your environment. We used to tell customers the same thing back in the late 2000s when I was doing this work. It's like, hey, this is a snapshot. So just because I give you a compliant report doesn't mean that 2 days from now you're still going to be compliant. If you did something, if you had a configuration drift, you changed something, you moved a system out. And it's usually accidental, but we have seen people doing it maliciously, putting things a certain way to pass an assessment, and then reverting back to the old ways. Definitely don't want that. But the continuous compliance and being able to measure that is going to help your internal teams have confidence that they've done this correctly, and it's going to reflect when you go do your QSA assessments. They should go much faster. So that's a quick overview on the changes of PCI 4.0. I really appreciate you letting me tell you about them.
Oh man, thanks, Brandon. That was like a fire hose of information. There's definitely a lot changing, and it's really cool to see that it's moving towards like a real-time continuous validation thing, because like you said, I think these point in time snapshots, everybody puts on their best shirt and shows up for work early, and then as soon as the auditor's out the door, things kind of drift back to maybe not having the best practices. So I think this makes everybody safer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So now that we've explored Josh, did you have something? You're muted.
I'm so sorry. I was just saying I feel measurably more educated, maybe slightly confused. So it goes a little bit over my technical brain, but that was a fantastic explanation.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
It was great. Okay. Take care, Brandon. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Hey, thank you, Brendan. Really a pleasure.
Bye.
All right. So now that we've explored what's changed, I was going to say the why, but I feel like that was much more than that. Let's take a look at the business perspective. And I think this is what really interesting, what you folks do at ControlCase. You've been pioneering this ideas of compliance as a service, and we can see how complicated that is. So I guess, maybe just explain that to me in practice. What does compliance as a service mean to like a managed security service provider or somebody that's wanting to bring compliance into their practice?
Well, sure. I'm going to start off, and let me start with the idea that if you're an MSP or an MSSP and you're not addressing compliance with your clients right now, you're missing out on a massive opportunity. And the opportunity is to help your clients save time, save money, save stress. By virtue of being an MSSP or an MSP, you have data, you have evidence, you have strategic information, you have a relationship, you have trust, you have a lot of the components that fit into this. And I'm probably a good example of what a customer could be like. I am not the most technical person in the world. And so putting all of this into practice as a client can be challenging. Most people don't become PCI compliant because they want to. They become PCI compliant because they have to. And your role as an MSP or an MSSP is not to convince them why they should do it. Your role is to teach them why doing it with you is more effective. And as a source of revenue, look, it's great. As a source of profitability, it's terrific. As a source of relationship, it's essential. It's a retention-based activity. Clients that are doing their certifications, attestations, audits, assessments, et cetera, with you, they are far more likely to build a long-term trustful relationship with you. And when it comes to taking care of the things, Brandon mentioned remediation. When it comes to taking the activities associated with remediation, the MSP, MSSP is best situated to address that and address it in a way that fits into the context of all of the other deployments that are taking place, whether they're security-based or whether they're infrastructure-based. They already have all the information to know what's going to work and how it's going to most effectively work. Now, at ControlCase, we have been working inside PCI for over 20 years. It has been the heartbeat of our business. We understand it at a level of depth that very few others do. And I'll let Ashish dive into that in a moment because he's truly an expert. While leading our entire European market, Ashish also has this incredible technical background that fits very well into this conversation. But over time, we have developed programmatics for the MSSP and MSP to help deliver these things and to help deliver everything from pre-readiness work to readiness to assessments to attestations, certifications across PCI and 66 other frameworks, along with the consulting capability to deal with literally hundreds of other things that come across their plate. And the reason that we have developed this for MSPs and MSSPs to do this is because it is logical. It makes complete sense. and putting that technical capability together with the ability to deliver it is something that we've become very strong at over these years. We've been a participant with the PCI Council for a significant amount of time. And if you were to find us at one of the PCI expos, it's typically giving a talk about the technical attributes, the things that Brendan was just referring to. And I'm incredibly excited about this opportunity, having led an MSP before and having worked on sell with strategies with MSPs and MSSPs through other organizations like Palo Alto Networks, Avaya, Datto, et cetera. The opportunity to go to market together, the better together story here as it relates to all of this compliance work, Christopher, related directly to what you do to provide expertise into the marketplace, to put all those things together creates an environment where we can all be successful together. And ultimately, that's what we want. We want our customers, our clients, our MSPs, and their clients to be protected. And when we work together at that, when we have a shared mission, a shared vision, it becomes so much more relevant. Now, Ashish, if you don't mind, I'd love to turn it over to you for a moment because you have this experience across, well over a decade with ControlCase, so where you could probably share a little bit more.
Sure. Thanks, Josh. I think that one of the things which you mentioned, right, better together, I think from that MSP and MSSP's perspective, I think that better together works in two ways, right? One is from our end, the compliance expertise, the technical expertise, our subject matter expertise on PCI. And the second aspect is guiding the MSPs and MSSPs on how they can utilize their, strengths and what are their capabilities into things which Branden was mentioning, like Josh mentioned about remediation, about some of these activities which have come as a part of 4.0 requirements, right? Means at the top of my head, I can think of, multi-factor authentication, which has become now mandatory. Earlier, it was only mandatory for remote access. Now, any kind of non-console access has to be multi-factor authentication. If it is a CDE environment, then we are talking about, payment scripts, payment script monitoring, payment script tamper protection, all these kind of activities. These are some things which MSPs or MSSPs have the capabilities either to give directly or through some of their channels. And this is where we can guide the MSPs and MSSPs in a direction as to how they are going to, monetize based on the compliance attributes as well as based on the attributes which are contributing to remediation, to maintaining that compliance, to working towards, this continuous compliance framework or continuous compliance environment that PCI is looking at. Because now means business as usual was something which was already there in the 3.2.1 version of PCI DSS. But with 4.0, this has, metamorphosed into what is called as continuous compliance, right? So it has gone one step ahead of business as usual and with continuous monitoring and things like that. So many of the continuous compliance activities, continuous compliance, mandatory requirements, ControlCase has the capability to provide that and support the MSPs and MSSPs to provide to their clients. But at the same time, there are many activities and many functions which the MSPs and MSSPs can do themselves, and they have the capabilities. And because they have, as Josh rightly said, they have access to their client environments, they have access to their asset inventory, they have access to all these things. They know the client better than anyone, right? So that's where, the better together between ControlCase and the MSSPs and MSPs would definitely work.
And if you don't mind me adding on, and I'm always hesitant to try and make this about, an advertisement for ControlCase. Look, we want to be helpful to MSPs and MSSPs. We want to serve the marketplace. But the reality is that if you're not doing it today, you have to do it, whether it's with us or not, because your clients need you to be a part of this, to save that time, that money, that stress. And as you start to explore what might be scary to you or what might not be scary to you. There is a lot of service providers out there that look at this and say, I don't have the expertise for this. I don't have the staff for this. I don't have the tools, or I don't have the manpower available, whatever it might be. Finding a complementary partner, one that can make sure that you're still capable of doing what you do today for the client so that you're not losing dollars out of your P&L, and finding that partner that can supplement or complement what you do. That's the mission inside of this. And you can grow your capabilities over time. You could begin to take on more of that work. As a matter of fact, it's something that we regularly advocate for, is that you should take on more of that work. You should grow your business. Everybody should win in this conversation. Most importantly, the client. They should be viewing this as, when I put all of these things together, whether it's what you do, Christopher, what we do, what the MSP does, or what they have normally done throughout their compliance journey, that there's a symbiotic win inside of this, where everybody's going to function as a team together. It's going to be collaborative, and it's going to end up in a result, an outcome that delivers the client exactly what they need, which is, this is a need-based exercise. This is something that they're typically required to do. And their clients, the client's clients, are going to be the better for it.
So yeah, just to summarize in very short order, you guys allow MSSPs very quickly to start offering compliance as part of their portfolio without becoming auditors themselves. And then you do the attestation as well, right? You're validating that those deployments are correctly implemented.
Yeah, we don't require that they're able to do anything, being candid. If they're not able to do any of this work, then we can step in and function as the entire journey partner for their client base. But we also love to work with organizations that either have pieces of this, maybe they do readiness and we step in and complete the process, or maybe they're doing some of the scanning and we're not, or maybe they're doing some of the testing associated with it and we're not. That's okay too. As a matter of fact, we do love it, because then we're even more partnered inside of that. And if they can't do it today, look, jump in. We can be a part of this. We could be a part of teaching the organization, and then you can learn it and add it over time and grow your business in other ways. But the short answer to the question is, we're able to start from ground zero with a service provider and take them all the way through the process.
It's very cool. You know, I just love how it connects the dots between the compliance value and the service delivery, and it lets people jump in right away. So maybe it's time to look at what it's like to make that concrete. And I'll pass it over to Chris Patello from LimaCharlie, and he can, give us an example of how this works in practice.
Excellent.
Yeah, thanks for coming out, you guys.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Chris Patel. I'm a senior solutions engineer here at LimaCharlie, and I'm just going to walk through a couple of the different ways that LimaCharlie can help you achieve and maintain your PCI DSS compliance. So, for starters, what is LimaCharlie? LimaCharlie, in simplest terms, is a security operations platform that gives you everything that you need to build a security operations program from the ground up. So, if you think about all the different pieces that go into security operations, whether it's your log aggregation, your automation, or the ability to integrate with other platforms, that's all available through LimaCharlie. That's why we call it the SecOps platform. With that, obviously, you're going to start off with needing to get data in. So we do that through what are called sensors. And within those sensors, we have two different methods of getting the data into the platform. First one is going to be our agents. So when I talk about our agents, these are actually our EDR agents that are sitting on the endpoint, pulling in that really deep, rich telemetry from the host. They also give you the ability to connect back to those hosts and perform actions on them, gather more information from them, or perform forensics on them. So all of that can be done through our agent. As you can see here, we support multiple platforms. The main ones just being Linux, Windows, Mac OS, and even Chrome browser, Chrome OS, and Edge, because it's a Chromium-based browser. So those all bring in that really deep telemetry, letting you know what's going on in the system, what files are being written to, what files are being modified, what files being created and deleted, what registry changes are happening. All of that comes in through our platform and can be correlated against anything else that's coming in as well. Then we also have our adapters. The adapters are kind of just that generic way of getting the data in that's not coming in through our agent. So those adapters, as you can see here, are available for multiple platforms. These are going to be things like if you have on-premise systems where you need to get in syslog data, or legacy systems that can only output to files. You can put an adapter on the system, read that data in, and it's really simple, and then bring it into the platform. Now, the great thing about LimaCharlie is all of the data is stored for a year. So when I talk about these events coming in, all of them right out of the box are stored for a year. And that's not just a year where you have to sit and wait for things to come back. That's actually a year that's available online. So if I go into the platform, I can even show that to you. Now, I'm only going to go back to the beginning of this year just because it's quickest and easiest to do. But this is when we go into the platform, this is our LimaCharlie query console. And so using the LimaCharlie query language, I can actually go and search for historical data. So here I'm just going to look for everything. I want to just look for all the events that I can find. And we're going to do this for back at the beginning of the year. Now, for most SIMs and most log aggregation platforms, this would be a long, drawn-out process of pulling data back in, reading it, parsing through it. It could take minutes. It could take hours. It just really depends on how much data was available back then. But now you see the data is already here. And I can even start digging into it and seeing what happened on the systems. As you can see here, I've got new files being created. I've got processes being terminated. This is all that really deep telemetry that's coming from the host itself. And I also even have the Windows event log. So it's not just the telemetry that's coming in, but I'm also getting those event logs coming in so I can see what else is going on in the system and build those correlation rules off of it. Now, what's really cool about it all is if I go to the systems that are generating this data, I can actually dig in even further. So I'm going to go kind of look at the live feed for this one system that I have running right now. And you can see, I can even see that a registry has been modified, see what the new value is. So I'll pick one of these registry write events, and I can even dig in and see what actually made the change to that registry. So this goes back to the PCI requirements of making sure that you know the changes that are happening on the system. So this tells me that a registry entry was changed and gives me the new value of it. So this shows an example of our registry integrity monitoring. Now, obviously, you want to be able to define those rules and build everything out. So what we can do, so I'm going to go here and go to our file integrity monitoring rules. You can see I've got a bunch of rules built out, different for different operating systems. I've got, I'm here. I've got this one where it's monitoring a user hive, so we can really define the deep granular monitoring that we want to for the system, and look for things like scheduled tasks. If the scheduled task changes on a system, it's indicative that there might be a compromise if it wasn't something you expected, or your auto runs, any kind of those little hints that a system has been compromised. You can build that out, those rules out to alert. And the great thing is when you alert, it's not just alerting within the platform. So obviously we're going to have our detections, and those are built out using our rules, our rule engine. But obviously you don't always want to have to be able to go in and look. And so you can actually output to different systems. So if you want to take your alerts and you want to output them to Slack, you can do that. If you want to send them out to an automation engine such as Times of Torque, you can do that as well. Or if you want to send something like Teams, so get your alerts via Teams, you can do that with our generic webhook. It really kind of just lets you send it to wherever you want and build it out however you can envision it. As you can see, we have a bunch of the different outputs available out of the box. Even just generic old email. If you want to send it to an email box, you can do that as well. It's however you want to build it to be. Now, I've mentioned a couple times about our alerting. So I just want to show our detection response rules. They're pretty simple. They're all written in YAML. And so if you understand YAML, it's going to be very, very second nature to you. But as an example, here's just a rule that's looking for a certain event coming into the platform. And if it's a tagged system and that the operating system starts with a Windows 1, such Windows 10, Windows 11, then we're going to actually add it. So We have our detection rules that we're building up here, and then the responses we're going to take. Your response can be anything from just generate an alert, or in this case, adding a tag, or you can even go so far as running extensions. So we have a Python playbook that you can actually go in and put in Python scripts and run that playbook with the details of this event and then get the output of it. So if you want to go have it query a different system, you want to have it go send an alert somewhere, you want to have another playbook executed. The cool thing is you can also just say that use this to perform forensic actions on the system. So all the functionality that you get with our EDR agent, you can actually access that through the LimaCharlie platform through our response rules. And so it really kind of just gives you your wherever your imagination can go. So let's take a look at what the functionality that our EDR agent actually gives you. So if I go take a look back here at this Windows Server sensor, you can see I have a bunch of different options available. Our EDR agent gives you not just the details, the telemetry coming out, but also lets you interact with the system. So I can even see here what integrity monitoring rules are applied. So you can see I'm monitoring files, I'm monitoring registry entries. All this, if something changes, will generate an alert. In addition to that, I can go in and see what detections have been found on the system. So these are all coming in via those YAML rules. And but this is just for this one system. Then I can also go and look and see, do I want what packages, what software is installed in the system? Look through it and see if there's something that's malicious. And the great thing is these are all come back as responses, as events within LimaCharlie. So I can write rules that actually trigger if something malicious is found. Finally, if I want to just go browse the file system looking for malicious files, if an alert came in and I want to go investigate it, I can do that right from the console. It's all available right here, even looking at those auto runs. So I mentioned before, as kind of an indicator of compromise. Now we can actually go and look and see, did those auto runs change? So if I got an alert that an auto run changed, I can go and actually verify it. It gives you the ability to really look into the system and figure out what's going on, validate alerts, and determine if there has been a compromise or not, and start to if there was, to look for the extent of that compromise. We also offer artifacts. So the artifacts are going to be files that are captured off the system. So you can see here, I've got Velociraptor outputs. I've got Windows event logs. All of this gets stored in the LimaCharlie cloud in a forensically sound manner. So even if a system is compromised, all this gets uploaded and can't be changed. All the data is immutable. And so you can actually go in here and see, all right, these are the files that I have. Here's the state that the system is in, and investigate everything that's going on through the LimaCharlie console itself. So I hope that kind of gives just a good overview of what LimaCharlie can do. And Chris, I'll give it back to you.
Awesome demo, Chris. That really brings things to life. From philosophy to business model to implementation, we've now seen the full story of how PCI DSS 4 can move from a static requirement to a dynamic capability. What ties it all together is a change in posture. Compliance isn't just a once-a-year event anymore. It's an ongoing capability that strengthens trust with customers and regulators alike. When you combine the governance experience of ControlCase with the operational power of LimaCharlie, you create a platform for continuous validation, a foundation that supports both compliance and innovation. If you're an MSSP, this is your chance to get ahead, to turn PCI 4 into a managed service that clients actually want to subscribe to. If you're an enterprise, think about how you can make your controls provable, repeatable, and automated. Huge thanks to Dr. Branden R. Williams, the team at ControlCase, and my colleague Chris Patello for sharing their expertise today. Thanks again to everyone who joined us. If you'd like to continue the conversation or explore how LimaCharlie and ControlCase can help modernize your PCI approach, we'll be following up with resources and contact details. Thanks so much for spending part of your day with us. We'll see you on the next one.